Hello again, Jeff Scott at Blackhawk Technical College. This is part 2 of Chapter 6. It has been taped once, but for some reason the power just literally stopped on the Mac. Don't know why, but it did. So I tried to recover it, but it told me when it recovered it that it saved it as a file that was about 500 and some meg, and I thought good. I went back to try to run it, it will not run. So I'm retaping, which is not good. Alright, I left off on about page 188. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to this toolbar that I've added right here. So there's the toolbar, and I'm just going to remove it. There. Start all over again here. So come back down here, toolbar. There it is. I want to grab it, pin it down near the bottom here. Looks pretty good. Double click on it. I'm changing the text to switching views. Alright. So that's the first thing that we were supposed to start doing. So I've added the toolbar that's shown on page 189. And it says we want to keep this toolbar stretched across the bottom. To do that, we need to add 3 layout constraints, one that pins the toolbar to the bottom and to the view, and the other 2 to pin it to the left and right side. To do this, select the toolbar and then click Pin. So, clicked on the toolbar. I'm clicking Pin. And I'm going to change the values in the pop-up as are shown on the top page 190. So, $536, 0, 0 and 0. All right. And we want to uncheck the constrain the margins. Finally, change the update frames to items of new constraints. All right. And click the add 3 constraints. Now to make sure that it's working, click the Run button. To make the app launch on the iOS simulator, you should see a plain white app start up with a pale gray border on the bottom containing the lone button. Alright, so let's do a file save and let's run. This gets me up to page 191. Like I said, I was through and I put in just a boatload of code already. I was up to about the middle of page 197, the bottom of page 197. So I only had about 5 or 6 pages to go. So, build failed. Well, okay. No code error there. Oh, there's some there. Okay, this is all code that I've already put in, so for some reason something is goofed up. It's supposed to be dot alert. Fixes that one. All right, it's just about where it should be, I believe. Should be handler : nil. And we'll go over all this code in just a bit. So let me save. Hopefully that cleaned up all the problems that I had with the file. Build failed. Doggone it. Okie dokie. Again, as mentioned, I put in a bunch of code. Now the build succeeded, so ideally at least I'm going to be able to run this and it will come up okay, which will get me back to page 191. The toolbar has a single button that we're going to use to switch between our two content views. I already double clicked it and changed its title to switch views. All right. And then they mentioned now we can link the toolbar up to our action method in switching view controller. Before doing this, you should be aware that toolbar buttons aren't like other iOS controls. They support only a single action that happens at one well-defined moment, the equivalent of a touch-up event. So we're going to do that in just 1 second. We'll select the toolbar button, and once we've got it selected, we're going to control drag over to the switching view controller icon at the top. And hopefully that'll kind of fix things up in just a couple minutes. Not sure why this is taking so long. Not happy with it at all, so I'm just going to stop the run and go back and run it again later and hope that everything is going to be okay. Yeah, I lost my connection. There you go. Terminating with uncaught exception. Fantastic. Like I said, this was working so doggone well before. Doesn't contain a view controller with identifier blue. Well, I'm not sure why that would be, because it should, but that's fine. We'll come back to that. So I'm going to stop the simulator. Going back. Bringing up my main storyboard again. Closing a few things. All right, and now what we're told to do is to go in here and find our button on our toolbar. Okay, don't need that right now. There we go. All right, now we want to control drag from here over to from here over to here. All right, so control drag, and when we let go, we want to select the switch views action right there. All right, so we've now done all the work on page 191. We have one more thing to point out in this scene, which is the switching view controller's view outlet. This outlet is already connected to the view in the scene. The view outlet is inherited from the parent class UI view controller and gives the controller access to the view it controls. All right, so next we're supposed to write the view controller. So I think that this code is all in here, but we're going to find out right now. So I'm going to go into my switching view controller.swift file, and in my view did load, the code that we want to go over is the stuff that's here, and hopefully it comes up in a light blue, but and it's blue view controller equals storyboard question mark dot instantiate view controller with identifier blue as blue controller as blue view controller, excuse me, blue view controller dot view dot frame equals view dot frame, and switch view controller from nil to blue view controller. Now, they do mention on the bottom of page 192 in the book that if we take our mouse, double click on view did load, and hold down on the option key and click it, we get information about view did load. Well, we should. There it is. What you see up on the screen is the same thing that you see in the book on the bottom of page 192. The author says, alternatively, we should be able to highlight it and select View, Utilities, Show Quick Help Inspector. All right, and there you get similar information off to the side. The version of blue, what we just did right here, how's that? The code that you see here in blue creates an instance of blue view controller. We use the instantiate view controller with identifier to load the blue view controller instance from the same storyboard. All right. And we use an identifier, in this case the string blue, that we're using to help set up the actual storyboard. So the first line that you see in there assigns this new instance to our blue view controller property. So that's what we're doing right there. Next, we set the frame of the blue view controller's view to be the same as that of the switch view controller's content view, and switch to the blue view controller so that it appears on the screen. So in other words, when the program starts up, this is the one we want to have running. Since we need to perform a view controller switch in several places, the code to do this is in the helper method switch view controller from to, which we'll talk about in just a couple minutes. Now, it would have been possible here to not only load the blue view controller, but the yellow view controller as well. And the author mentions down towards the bottom half of page 193 that we'll load the yellow view controller the first time it's actually needed. This is called lazy loading, and it's a standard way of keeping memory overhead down. So in other words, when the program runs and the blue view controller comes up, we have no guarantee that the user literally wants to click the switch views button and bring up the yellow view controller. So we don't bring it up and load it until it's needed, and that's what they're talking about on here. All right, if we find our function switch views, which is down here, and I'm going to just start going down, going down here a little bit. All right, now it's up near the top. And you can see the code, like I said, this is in our switch views method. Switch views first checks to see if the view being swapped in. So the first thing it's doing there is it's checking to see if the yellow view controller's views super view is nil. And that will be true. It will be nil if one of two things happen. If either the yellow view controller exists, but its view is not being shown to the user, or if the yellow view controller doesn't exist because it hasn't been created yet or has been flushed from memory. We then check to see whether the yellow view controller exists, so that you check twice, for lack of better words. If the result is nil, that means that no instance of the yellow view controller, there is no instance, and we need to create one. Again, this could happen either because it's the first time the button was pressed or the system ran low on memory and it flushed what was in there. If we're switching in the blue controller, we need to do the same kind of check, and that's what's shown down here. So you can see the code here and the code here is almost identical, except that here it's yellow and over here it's blue. At this point, what we know is that we have a view controller instance because either we already had one or we just created one. All right, if we hadn't had one previously. We then set the view controller's frame to match that of the switch view controller's content view, then use this from to method to actually perform the switch. All right, and that's what's down here. So again, let's try to see if we can move this a little bit. So I'm talking about the code that's starting here on line 52. The first branch of the if is taken if we're switching from the blue view controller to the yellow one. The second one, which starts on line 57, is if we're going the other way. In other words, if we're switching from the yellow back to the blue. In addition to not using resources for the yellow view and controller, if the switch views button is never tapped, lazy loading gives us the ability to go in and release whichever view is not being shown, which will again free up some more memory. We can do this by adding the lines, a couple lines down near the bottom here. And actually that was the code that's right here, I think. Nope, I'm sorry, that's in the did receive memory warning. So that's the code that's right here. And as the author says, dispose of any resources that can be recreated. Again, the idea is we're checking to see which view is currently being shown to the user, and we release the controller of the other view, and we do that by assigning nil to its property. This causes the controller, along with the view it controls, to be deallocated, freeing up yet additional memory. And they mentioned on the top of page 196 in the book, the author says, lazy loading, is a key component of resource management in iOS, and you should implement it anywhere you can. All right. So the final piece of the puzzle, so to speak, is this switch view controllers, which is down near the bottom, right here, starting here on about line 64. This is responsible for the view controller switch. It's a two-step process. First, we need to remove the view for the controller that's currently being displayed, and then we need to add the view for the new view controller. In addition, we have some housekeeping to do. All right. The author starts by showing you the code there on page 196, and then decides that he's going to go over the second if statement first, which he says this code makes the incoming view controller of a child of the switching view controller. View controllers, like switching view controller that manage other view controllers, are typically referred to as container view controllers. Making the new view controller a child of switching view controller ensures that certain events are delivered to the root view controller and they're correctly passed to the child view controller when required. Okay. Next, the child view controllers is added to that of the switching view controller, and that's the line the self.view.insert subview. It's inserted in index 0, which tells iOS to put this view behind everything else. Sending a view to the back like this ensures that the toolbar we created in the interface builder will always be visible on the screen, since we're inserting the content views behind it. And then in the next line, we notify the view controller that it has been added as the child of another controller. All right, then they mention on page 197 that the first if statement just reverses the steps we performed when we added. Okay? All right, this is about where I'd gotten to when I had the mechanical difficulties. So on the bottom half of page 197, at this point the code is complete, but we can't run the app yet because we don't have the blue and yellow content controllers in the storyboard. These two controllers are simple. They each have one action triggered by a button, and neither one needs outlets. The two views are nearly identical. They're so identical they could have been represented by the same class, but the author chose to make them two separate classes because, again, that's how most multi-view apps are constructed. So the code that's in blue view controller.swift, the new code, is the stuff that's right here, again in blue, starting on about line 24 and ending on about line 34. So let me double check the code that's here with, I know there are no errors in it, but what's in the book on the bottom of page 197. Looks like it's correct, all the code on page 197. Save the file, switch over to the yellow view controller, and we're going to put in almost the same code. Now I cheated a bit here, all right, because I just copied this in, but I'm going to change most of the blue stuff here to yellow. Save this file as well. So I'm on the bottom half of page 198. Next, select the main storyboard to open it in the interface builder. So we can make a few changes. First, we need to add a new scene for Blue View Controller. Up until now, each storyboard we've dealt with contained a single view controller view pairing, but the storyboard has other things that it can do, and holding multiple scenes is one of them. From the object library, drag out another view controller and drop it into the editing area next to the existing one. There's the view controller. So drop it into the editing area next to the other one. All right, so I'm going to try to stick that. Let's see. From the object library, drag out another view controller and drop it into the editing area next to the existing one. No, it didn't like that. Huh. Into the editing area. Two scenes, each of them loaded dynamically. Well, I'm not sure how to put that in there, but I'm gonna keep trying. So. Don't think it's going to let me put it up here. Nope, and it didn't. Won't let me put it there. Huh. This would be the editing area, or at least that's what I thought it was. See, it won't let me put it out there. It shows it here, but it won't let me drop it in here. See, there it is. That must be what we have to do here, is put it there. That makes sense. Now your storyboard has two scenes, each of which can be loaded dynamically and independently while your app is running. In the row of icons at the top of the new scene, single click on the View Controller icon. And bring up the Identity Inspector. In the Custom Class section, class defaults to UI View Controller. Let's change this to Blue View Controller. We also need to create an identifier for this new view controller so that our code can find it inside the storyboard. Just below the custom class, you'll see a storyboard ID field. Click there and type blue to match what we used in our code. Now we have two scenes. We showed you earlier how to configure your app to load this storyboard at launch time, but we didn't mention anything about scenes there. So you might wonder how the app will know which of the scenes to show. The answer lies in the big arrow pointing at the first scene, as shown in figure 618, that's on page 199. That arrow right there, that arrow points to the storyboard's default scene, which is the app which shows when it starts up. If you want to choose a different default scene, all you have to do is drag the arrow to the scene you want. Alright, this gets me to page 199. I have about 5 more pages to go through in this section, in the chapter. Single click the big square on the new scene we just added. And bring up the Attributes Inspector. In the View section, click the color well that's labeled Background. And use the pop-up color picker to change the background color to a nice light shade of blue. That's a little too dark. I like that one. Once you're happy with it, close the color picker. Drag a button from the library over to the view using the guidelines to center the button of the view horizontally and vertically. Okay. We want to make sure the button stays centered no matter what, so let's make two constraints that'll do this. First, select Editor Align. Horizontal Center in Container from the menu. And then do it again with an Editor Align. Well, we want it to be a vertical container in here, so. Don't know why the author asked you to do it that way. I'm really not sure, but they did. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up to here. Okay, I'm going to click on here. Go back over to here. Go over to Align. Horizontal, vertical. There. And then come back over to here and tell it to update frames. That should fix it. All right. Double click the button and change its title to Press Me. Why will it not let me change the... Let's come up to here. Okay. Okay, I knocked down the size of it just so it was showing here and I wouldn't have to play around with it. All right. With the button still selected, switch to the Connections Inspector. Drag from the Touch Up Inside event to the yellow View Controller icon at the top of the scene. Move this a little bit, there we go. So, drag from the Touch Up Inside event you'll notice that the text of the button is a blue color by default. Since our background color is also blue, that's kind of a big risk to take. All right, so they're telling us to come back in here and change the color. Text color from blue. We'll make it, let's make it black. That's fine. Press me. All right. Hopefully I've now done everything on page 199, which gets us up to 200. And I have 4 more pages, and then the chapter is finished. Now it's time to do pretty much the same set of things for the yellow view controller. All right, so let's close this. All right, we're going to have to come down here and create a view, find a view controller, drag and put it in here someplace. Let's see what kind of luck I don't have when I'm doing this. Guess I've got to let go of it quicker. All right. There's the blue view controller and the switching view controller. All right, and this is going to be the yellow view controller. So it says, don't worry if things are getting crowded. You can stack these on top of one another and it won't matter. All right. So click the view controller icon, use the identity inspector, come back here and we want to change its name to yellow view controller. All right, as we, oops, no, I don't want to look it up. It's yellow view controller, and in the storyboard ID, we want to make that yellow. All right. Next, select the view controller's view. And switch to the attributes inspector. Again, we want to change the background color, and they tell you to change it to a yellow, which I've done. Next, again, drag out a button. Again, this should be pretty familiar by now because we've already done it once. And again, line it up so it's in the middle, horizontally and vertically. All right, I'm going to change the text to press me. I'm going to change the size of that text so it matches the other one, making it 13. Maybe it was lower, maybe it was 10. I don't remember now. Let's see. It was 10. All right. And as we did before, we're going to come down then to the align and horizontally center it and vertically center it in the container. Should fix that. All right. We want to use the connections inspector to drag from the touch up inside event, just like we did before. So we'll have to move down. So with that highlighted, we'll go from the touch up inside event, control drag over to our view controller, and let go. That'll connect the yellow button pressed action method. When we're finished, save the storyboard and get ready to take the app for a spin. Well, here's hoping. Save. Says hit the run button in Xcode and your app should start up and present you with a full screen of blue. When the app launches, it should show the blue screen we built. When you tap the switch views button, it will change to show the yellow view that we built. Tap it again and it goes back to blue. If you tap the button centered On the blue or yellow view, you'll get an alert message with a message indicating which button was pressed. The alert shows the correct controller class for the view being called. The transition between the views is a little abrupt, so we'll fix that in just a matter of minutes. I'm wondering if for some reason when I went to build this, if it didn't build correctly. So let's see. No, it was up here already. Sorry. I'm going to stop the run because this would have been a good time to save anyway. All right. It says it's canceled. Good. Now on the bottom of page 200, and I've got to get to page 203. The bottom of page 200, it says UI view has several class methods we can call to indicate that the transition between the views should be animated, to indicate the type of transition that should be used, and to specify how long the transition should take. So we're going to go back to the switching view controller.swift and enhance our switch views method by adding a couple lines as are shown on page 201 in the book. We will get there in just a minute. Once we make these changes that are shown on page 201 in the book and compile and run the changes, when you tap the switch views button, instead of the new view just snapping into place, the old view should flip over to reveal the new view, as shown on page 202 in figure 619. So here's hoping. And it looks like it stopped because, again, I've got some kind of an error in here. Doggone it. Boy, oh boy. Unbelievable. Try it one more time just to see what's going on here. So the build's succeeding, so it's got to be something in the runtime that's making this goof up, and I'm not sure right now what it is. Well, that's a good start. Switch views. That looks like it's working. Press me. Doesn't like that. Press me. Doesn't like that either. So that isn't working. It is switching the way it should, but for some reason I'm going to have to go back and double check where we're writing the alerts because there's something there that it doesn't like. Alright, I will do that momentarily. First I'm going to go back into my project navigator, bring up the switching view controllers.swift file, and in our function switch views, which was right here, we're going to make a few changes as the author shows on page 201. First is right here. Alright, so we've got all that. And then we do our switch. So the first thing we want to do here is we want to add another line right here. Okay, else we want to come in here and we want to do almost the same thing, but we're flipping the other way. Instead of flipping from left blue to yellow, we're going from yellow to blue or vice versa. So alright, then finally, when we finish this else, right before we're all done, we want to say UI view.commit animations. Don't see any errors on here. Before I go back, because I've got left 2 pages, 202 and 203, but I want to very quickly, hopefully, my family's being very nice to me. They're upstairs while I'm trying to tape this. Well, that's one thing. Button has got 2 T's in it. Pressed, center UI button, little alert, UI controller title, pressed message, button on the blue view, preferred style, dot alert, alert action title. Yep, I did. Style, default handler, alert dot add action, present view controller, alert animate. Well, that looks good, much better than it did. File, save, and let's go to the yellow. And again, spelled incorrectly. Now I'm going to hope that they're now spelled correctly. So I'm going to go back and run this again. And if all is well, just have to finish up the stuff here on 202 and 203, and then we'll be finished. Now, if you notice the code that we put in here in our switching view controller, the stuff that we just added with the animations and the like, if you want to tell iOS that you want to change animated, you need to declare an animation block and specify how long the animation should take. Animation blocks are declared by using the UI view class method begin animations. So with what you just saw in there, it took 2 parameters. The first was the block title, which comes into play only if you take more direct advantage of core animation, which we won't get to until later. The second one that's in there is a pointer that allows you to specify an object or any other C data type whose address you would like associated with the animation block. We use nil here because we don't need to do this. After that, we set an animation curve to determine the timing of the animation. The default is a linear curve and causes the animation to happen at a constant speed. The option that we set here, UI view animation curve dot ease out, specifies that the animation should start slow and then speed up in the middle and then slow down at the end. So ease in, go fast, ease out at the end. Gives it a more natural and less mechanical appearance. Next, we need to specify the transition to use. All right. There are 5 iOS view transitions available as shown on page 203. Flip from left, flip from right, curl up, curl down, and none. All right. And the cache option speeds up drawing by taking a snapshot of the view when the animation begins and uses the image rather than redrawing the image at each step of the translation. So looking much better. Still have nothing. Doggone it. That's supposed to be giving us the message, and we're not getting that. So I'm going to check on that. All right, so mainly success in here. And the author mentions down at the bottom of page 203, and again, I'm going to check my code one more time. Although Xcode contains project templates for the most common types of multi-view apps, you need to understand the overall structure of these types of apps so that you can build them yourself from the ground up. In the next few chapters, we're going to continue building multi-view applications to reinforce concepts from this chapter. In Chapter 7, we'll construct a tab bar app, and we'll do that momentarily. Again, I'm going to come back, I'm going to quit the simulator, and I'm going to look one more time at my yellow and my blue. All right, and I also have to come back in here and make sure that in the main storyboard that I set up everything in here correctly too. All right. Okay.